Chapter 142. In this world of blood and darkness, the lush green vines were exceptionally bright. They were full of vitality as they grew and formed a large cocoon. Sacred Hall for a long time, only the rustling of the green vines could be heard. At some point, Qianrongji had stopped talking and was staring blankly at the large green cocoon. After confirming that Qianyanyan was dead, Diao Fei impatiently walked up and dispersed the green vines. He started searching Qianyanyan's body, but of course, there was no 100 treasures pouch. He couldn't help but turn around to look at the stubborn 16-year-old youth. He was currently standing in a sea of bloody corpses, looking up at the night sky with great concentration. The moonlight enveloped his body, as if all of this blood had nothing to do with him. The stars in the summer night were bright and dazzling. Even the moonlight couldn't diminish their beauty. Li Qingshan discovered that compared to the corpses on the ground, the starry sky was still much more beautiful. He wasn't pretending to think about life. He just suddenly felt a sense of regret. As for what exactly this feeling was, he didn't know. He couldn't help but think of that dream again, the stars sinking into the sea of blood. After thinking about life, Li Qingshan lowered his head. How many did you catch? 3. 2 escaped. Not bad. You praise me too much. After a few words, Diao Fei obviously wouldn't ask where Qianyanyan's 100 treasures pouch was or ask Li Qingshan to give him a share. He also had his own plans, which were to chase down a few second-layer Qi practitioners who posed no threat and then sneak back to see how things developed. If Li Qingshan was defeated, he would quietly leave and report to Zhuozhibua to ensure that he wasn't in any danger. But he never would have thought that Li Qingshan would really be able to drag Qianyanyan to this point. Diao Fei knew very well that his entanglement of green vines couldn't possibly catch a fifth-layer Qi practitioner. Qianyanyan was clearly at the end of his rope, and this was all thanks to Li Qingshan. Sacred Hall, though he seemed to be in an extremely difficult and horrible shape, Li Qingshan had truly worn down a fifth-layer Qi practitioner. It was better to maintain some respect for the strong. As for the Qi practitioners at the foot of the mountain, even though they were quite far away, they had many ways to see the top of the mountain. At this moment, their faces were filled with disbelief. From the beginning until the end, they had not seen any hidden masters of the Hawkwolf Guard. It was actually just this young man alone. As a second-layer Qi practitioner, he had been able to fight against Qianyanyan for so long. In the end, he actually won out of the blue. Could it be that Qianyanyan's body had deteriorated to such an extent that he was taken advantage of? That was probably the only explanation. Gong Liangbai murmured, "How is this possible?" This was also what the other Qi practitioners were thinking. The water-splitting thorn fell to the ground with a clang, and the faint sound of sobbing could be heard. The moment Qianrongji saw Qianyanyan's body, her entire body trembled. The smile on her face had completely disappeared. She was stunned for a moment, and a warm liquid slid down her face. It wasn't blood, but tears. She had no idea why she was crying. All she did was suddenly bawl. Li Qingshan and Diao Fei glanced at one another. They said nothing. Li Qingshan sucked in a deep breath and said loudly, "Today, Li Qingshan, Diao Fei, and Qianrongji of the Hawkwolf Guard have executed Qianyanyan in accordance with the law." After a pause, he continued, "And they have annihilated the entire Qian family to serve as a warning to the rest. You Qi practitioners are blessed by the heavens, so you should take this as a warning. If you care about right and wrong and commit atrocities, going against the laws of nature, you will suffer from this." His loud voice drowned out Qianrongji's sobs, clearly reaching the foot of the mountain and echoing through the entire city. The first cheer rang out from a dark corner of the alleyway. It was just a scholar in dire straits. He could not help but sigh in admiration carefully. 2 years ago, the Qian family forcefully demolished his ancestral home to build a garden. He was forced to live on the streets with his wife and child, and he fell ill from anger, almost losing his life. He finally recovered after much difficulty and rented a shabby room, relying on writing and selling paintings to barely make a living. However, he was unable to settle the knot in his chest. Originally, he thought it would weigh on his heart for the rest of his life, but he never thought there would finally be a day where he would get his revenge. 7*. However, the cry was like a rock tossed into a still lake, kicking up ripples before turning into a surging sound wave. The sound wave shot up and reached the platform on the top of the mountain, as if it was responding to Li Qingshan's words. Li Qingshan saw that the ancient Wind City was lit up one after another. Countless citizens walked out of their houses and cheered excitedly. Many of them hugged each other and cried. It was as if they were celebrating a grand festival. The lanterns and firecrackers that the Qian family had forced them to prepare were finally put to use. They were celebrating the destruction of the Qian family. Li Qingshan smiled faintly. Perhaps there were many innocent people among the corpses on the ground. However, he was not an American hero who was obsessed with moral purity. As a man of steel, how could he not bear the responsibility of a few lives? He had destroyed the entire Qian family, so he had destroyed the entire Qian family. There was nothing he would not dare to admit. Why not cry for one family instead of another? Only the Qi practitioners hiding in the dark had their expressions changed drastically. Li Qingshan's threatening words were clearly directed at them. However, they felt angry and humiliated. At the same time, there was an indescribable pressure and even a hint of fear. They subconsciously checked themselves, wondering if they were like the Qian family. Li Qingshan's killing of Qian Yannian and the destruction of the Qian family was cheered by the crowd. He was like a god of law, standing on the altar and pointing his eyes at all demons and monsters. Who would dare to face him head-on? They could only cower in fear. Li Qingshan did not give these people any face. They came to celebrate Qian Yannian's birthday, but it did not mean that Qian Yannian had committed all sorts of evil deeds. They would probably defend themselves and say that they did not understand the Qian family's actions. However, who would not have heard such a loud voice that soared into the clouds? Even if they heard it, they would turn a deaf ear to it. They understood the principle of self-preservation and were unwilling to offend a Qi practitioner family for the sake of ordinary people. The Qi practitioners hid in the dark and left the ancient Wind City. They all remembered a name. Li Qingshan said, "Are you done crying?" Qian Rongji raised her head in a daze. Li Qingshan said, "If you're done crying, then let's go. Our mission is over." Moreover, he had already obtained what he wanted. After saying this, he ignored Diao Fei and Qian Rongji. He only glanced at the treetops in the distance before striding down the mountain. Qian Rongji said, "Wait." Li Qingshan turned around in confusion, only to see Qian Rongji smiling and wiping away her tears. She said, "I haven't taken anything yet." Then she started rummaging through the pile of corpses, muttering, "You guys left a weak girl like me here. I'll be scared." Li Qingshan was dumbfounded. He had thought that she would be able to relieve the pressure in her heart after getting her revenge. Not only would she lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha, but she would also be able to gain some understanding of life and become less narrow-minded and vicious. However, the truth was exactly the opposite. Getting her revenge had indeed released some things from her heart. However, what was released was not the beautiful feelings that the world expected, or the suppressed innocence and kindness. She finally didn't have to pretend to be the Qian clan's first miss anymore. Laughing amidst the pile of corpses, she seemed to have fused that aura of insanity into her bones, becoming more and more twisted. Only now did he realize that everything about being enlightened and forsaking evil for good was all made up in stories. The true state of the world was that it was easy to change mountains and rivers, but it was hard to change one's nature. There were Buddhas and demons in the world, or perhaps this was also the state of the world? Qian Rongji slightly curled her dress. "Thank you for your help today. Only then could I get my revenge. If you don't mind, I'm willing to repay you with my body." Her face was full of smiles, and she seemed to be in a good mood. Li Qingshan's footsteps did not stop. Diao Fei walked even faster, as if avoiding snakes and scorpions, leaving Qian Rongji's silly laughter behind him. Qian Rongji paced around the pile of corpses like a pitch-black ghost. She was no longer searching for something. Instead, she was like an artist admiring her favorite work. A tourist strolled through a beautiful garden. She stopped from time to time, holding a familiar face and saying a few words to it. Even if she didn't get a reply, she would still chuckle for a long time. Compared to this purgatory of corpses, She seemed to be even more strange and terrifying. Little and got the hint from Li Qingshan, but he did not leave immediately. Instead, he hid at the side and entered a state of intense thinking. The eminent monk was blessed with both fortune and wisdom. He saw that the world was like a fire, and the house was like a sea of bitterness, and the people were drowning in it. Greed, anger, stupidity, and could not extricate themselves. Even if he cultivated Mahayana Buddhism, he still couldn't save all living beings. He mourned for their misfortune and was angry for their inaction. Mourning gave birth to boundless compassion, and anger gave birth to boundless killing intent. During the great calamity of heaven and earth, at the juncture of life and death, he found that his heart was still hindered. Once again he saw his heart and understood his nature. Thus, he followed his heart and made the 4 great vows, so that his thoughts would not be hindered, and he would be able to survive the calamity. Such as the heavenly demon, his nature was extremely evil. Once he understood his nature, he slaughtered and became free, equal to Buddha. Oh, I understand. That eminent monk was a super genius. He saw that all living beings were stupid and stupid. No matter what he said, they wouldn't listen, and no matter what he said, they wouldn't understand. His heart was traumatized, and he was suppressed by the 4 words "My Buddha is merciful." He could only keep it in his heart and couldn't release it, so the pressure was as great as a mountain. It is easier to kill him with a single blow than to bring him, oh no, a horrid mass of idiots to the other side. It is like having a swarm of flies around him all day, and he grabs the fly, squeezes its belly open, pulls out its intestines, and puts the intestines around its neck and gives it a good yank. Heh, his whole tongue was sticking out. He raised his hand and slashed down. Whoosh, the whole world was peaceful. In a small inn at the foot of the mountain, Little and wrote down his understanding on a piece of paper and told it to Li Qingshan. After thinking about it, Li Qingshan said so. Little and was dumbfounded. He felt that after Li Qingshan said this, the eminent monk's realm had dropped by more than 1 level. Originally, even if he fell into the path of evil, he was still a white-bone bodhisattva with great wisdom and power. Now, he felt that the pain and troubles this bodhisattva had experienced were no different from those of a commoner. Li Qingshan said, "Hey, Little, and let me tell you, the most important thing to be a person is to be happy. It's the same as being a skeleton. You can't go to extremes. Those who go to extremes are all mentally ill. When you meet someone who can be reasoned with, you talk to him. When you meet someone who can't be reasoned with, you stab him." Chapter 143. Li Qingshan continued, "All right, if you want to be a good person, you have to stretch your right cheek after being slapped on the left. If you can't take it anymore, you become a bad person, killing everyone on sight and disregarding your own family. If the Holy Church can't save the common people, you go and destroy them. If that's not a mental illness, what is it? You should comprehend and cultivate this ability when you should, but don't take it too seriously." As a result, a certain great figure above the 9 heavens was demoted to the level of a mental illness. If Oxen were here, he would definitely clap his hands in praise. It was not that Li Qingshan's words were impressive or that he displayed a great source of wisdom. On the contrary, his words were rather brainless, but contemplating the philosophy of life and the great Tao of the world had never been his forte. He was not a wise person. He did not have great wisdom or wisdom. He was not a benevolent person. He did not have great compassion or compassion. He was a brave person. He had a domineering and fearless spirit. If he could not understand, then he would not think about it. He would do whatever he wanted to do. These words sounded simple, but even great cultivators thousands of times more powerful than Li Qingshan could only carefully comprehend the essence of the ability created by immortals and Buddhas above the 9 heavens. It was impossible for them to be like Li Qingshan and say, "Don't take it too seriously." Humans could not be without respect, but the brave were fearless. No matter what you said, the ability and cultivation method were just tools in my hands. They existed for the sake of satisfying my thoughts. I must not allow any ideology to take over my thoughts. Little and naturally regarded Li Qingshan's earnest teachings as the best. He valued them much more than the essence of the path of white bone and great beauty. Although he felt that there was something off with Li Qingshan's words, it was definitely not Li Qingshan's fault. Perhaps he had not thought it through, or perhaps there was something wrong with that great monk. However, it freed him from his chaotic and profound thoughts, preventing him from being too deeply affected by the ability. Probably no one could have imagined that a half-baked teacher would have such a miraculous effect on an idiotic student. Li Qingshan felt rather proud of himself. No matter how talented and clever he was, little and was still a child. He still needed his guidance like a beacon. The holy churches, he said that. Li Qingshan's stomach growled again. He always got hungry easily after a great battle. He went out to eat before closing the door. Li Qingshan held back his excitement and took out Qian Yinyan's 100 treasures pouch. Let's see how we've benefited from this trip now. As soon as he channeled true qi into it, Qian Yinyan's 100 treasures pouch, he could not help but gasp in amazement. The pouch was the size. Qian Yanyan, Qian. He could not. As for Zhao Liangqing's 100 treasures pouch, Li Qingshan was afraid of the imprint of the gate, so he did not dare to carry it on him. However, this was fine. He could replace the one from the Hawkwolf Guard. A Ian 1000, Li Q. The first thing Li Qingshan wanted to collect were pills. Qian Rongji had not lied about one thing. He took out small bottles and placed them on the table. Before long, they filled the table. The Qian family's alchemy skills did not seem particularly impressive. Every single qi-gathering pill was the size of a longan at the very least, and each bottle could only hold 3. But even with that being the case, there were over 400 of them. The book was Qian Yinyan's greatest weapon for controlling the Qian family, yet it had all fallen into Li Qingshan's hands now. These pills were enough for him to reach the next level on the path of demons and demons. The ox demon's fist of great strength should be enough for him to reach the second layer. Afterwards, he could begin practicing the tiger demon's fist of bone forging. As for the spirit turtle's method of sea suppression, Li Qingshan practiced it every single day. It was basically no exception even when he practiced qi. Most of the effects of the qi-gathering pills had been devoured by him. Although there was still a very long way to go before he could undergo the first heavenly tribulation and become a demon general, he still sped along this path. Over 100 bottles of qi-gathering pills were stacked together. Li Qingshan felt refreshed as he looked at them. He beamed like a pauper who had suddenly struck gold. He casually fished out a pill and tossed it into the air. However, he did not swallow it directly. Instead, he held it in his mouth like he was eating candy. The qi-gathering pill refined from several dozen herbs was extremely bitter. It stimulated his mouth viciously. However, Li Qingshan tasted it like he was tasting tea. He tasted a sweet taste. Little and saw Li Qingshan furrow his brows and curl his lips as he counted the qi-gathering pills on the table again. For some reason, he thought of how Qian Rongji spoke to a corpse. There were not just qi-gathering pills. There were a few bottles of pills similar to the Pearl Dew pills. They were more precious pills known as 100 grasses pills. They were the enhanced version of the qi-gathering pills. Because they required more precious herbs and required more skill in refining pills, there were very few of them. There were only a dozen or so in total. Li Qingshan planned to save them for a critical moment, when he was about to break through. Other than that, there were also pills like the blood invigoration pill, used to strengthen qi and blood. Clearly, that old geezer Qian Yanyan knew he did not have long to live and wanted to live a few more years. 27 talismans. This was more than all the talismans Li Qingshan had obtained in his entire life of cultivation. Looking at the winding handwriting, Li Qingshan could only recognize a small portion of them. Among them, there were 5 mid-grade lightning talismans. These talismans were extremely powerful. If they were used outdoors in a thunderstorm, they could even attract lightning from the sky. The killing power was astonishing. Not to mention the other spirit talismans, just these 5 lightning summoning talismans alone. If Qian Yanyan didn't hesitate to use them all at once, he would be able to instantly kill any qi practitioner below the 6th layer. Even a 6th layer qi practitioner wouldn't dare to be careless. If it were not for the toughness of his demon avatar, Li Qingshan would basically be dead for sure if he came to make trouble for Xianxia. However, to Li Qingshan's slight pity, there were not many spiritual artifacts among them. There were only 2 low-grade ones. Clearly, Xianxia was not skilled in forging artifacts, nor was it possible for him to go around killing Qi practitioners like the Hawkwolf Guard. Among the 2 low-grade spiritual artifacts, one of them was a patterned hidden sword over a foot in length. However, after channeling true Qi into it, it shone with a light 5 feet long, turning into an extremely long sword. Li Qingshan immediately gave it to Little Anne. The other spiritual artifact was rather special. It was a round, wooden shield the size of a wash basin. When he tried channeling true Qi into it, the round shield suddenly became the size of a millstone and much heavier. Li Qingshan had already known that some spiritual artifacts could change shape, such as the metal ruler in Wang Puxi's hands. However, this was the first time he had obtained a spiritual artifact like that, and it was a defensive one at that. However, this spiritual artifact suited him extremely well. With it, he could wield the huge shield and charge around. If he encountered an enemy, he could just slam down with the shield. Who could stop him? Apart from that, there were some worldly items. The first item was actual gold and silver. 1,500,000 taels of silver notes was slightly less than he had imagined. Xianxia had occupied ancient Wind City for all these years, but his savings were actually not as great as Zhao Liangqing's. It made sense when he thought about it. The Qian family was large, so they had many people to support. Most of the money was probably in the hands of the caretakers below them. However, it was not just the silver notes that were money. There were also a large number of property deeds and land deeds. With a casual glance, the Qian family occupied most of the property in ancient Wind City, as well as several thousand acres of fertile land outside the city. According to the law, everything a Hawkwolf Guard obtained from carrying out a mission belonged to them. As a result, Li Qingshan had become a landlord overnight. When he thought about the days he spent in the cowshed back then, he could not help but sigh. Originally, Li Qingshan wanted to look for the cultivation method that allowed him to emit sword qi from his nostrils like what Xianxia practiced, but he did not find it. However, he did not find it to be a pity. He would earn contribution once he returned anyway, so he could visit the library of the Hawkwolf Guard. And he did not plan on changing cultivation methods before he reached the 9th layer with the innate method of practicing qi. He was in no hurry to find a new cultivation method either. The sounds of celebration outside the window had yet to stop. Gongs and drums filled the air as firecrackers crackled. It actually seemed like it would last for the entire night. Li Qingshan smiled. He ingested another qi-gathering pill and began cultivating. Shaoan also sat cross-legged beside him like an old monk. The next morning, a bitter but smiling district magistrate knocked on Li Qingshan's door. When he saw Li Qingshan, he was surprised. He never thought that the great Sir Hawkwolf Guard who had destroyed the Qian family and shocked ancient Wind City would actually be so young. He almost doubted whether he had found the wrong person. Li Qingshan said, "Sir, what business do you have with me?" The district magistrate was extremely familiar with the voice that rang through the night sky last night. He was certain that it was the person before him, so he told him the reason for his visit. Li Qingshan had no idea how to react. The district magistrate wanted to parade him through the streets in red, saying that the sedan chair was already prepared downstairs. Of course, he turned him down. The district magistrate did not dare to dissuade him. Who would be bold enough to force someone as vicious as him to do so? Li Qingshan said, "Compared to this, you should hurry up and get people to dispose of the corpses on the mountain. The weather is scorching right now, so we can't let a plague spread." The district magistrate said, "You're right, sir. I've already sent people to deal with it. Near the Qian estate, there's a pit at the foot of the western mountain. I've gathered the commoners to move the corpses there for burial, but the commoners find it filthy, and it's the corpses of people from the Qian family, so none of them are willing to help." Li Qingshan sank into thought. There should still be quite a lot of gold and silver utensils left in the Qian estate. Send people to search for them and treat them as wages for the commoners. You have to deal with this matter properly today. You can't make any mistakes. The district magistrate beamed with joy and agreed in a hurry. He thought to himself, "This Sir sure is considerate of the people." If Li Qingshan did not say anything, who would be bold enough to touch the items in the Qian estate? Li Qingshan had other plans in mind. After seeing off the district magistrate, he returned to his room and said to Little N, "Can you really cultivate like this?" Little N nodded. Li Qingshan asked, "How long will it take?" Little N shook his head. Li Qingshan said, "All right, we'll stay here for a while. It'll be perfect for us to calm down and cultivate for a while. If we return to Jiaping City, we probably won't be as calm anymore." "All right, Li Qingshan." In a small garden in the Hawkwolf Guard's office in Jiaping City, Zhuo Zhibua held a letter. The corner of his eye twitched, and his fury surged. He shattered the stone table with a palm strike. Chapter 144. Li Qingshan had no background at all. As a matter of fact, Wang Puxi did not even like him very much, which was why he just sent him under his command. In the sacred hall, if Gu Yenying really cared about this kid, then it was impossible for Wang Puxi to not care about him. It was just like how if Wang Puxi cared about a person, then he, Zhuo Zhibua, would have to serve him carefully. This was the simplest principle, but Zhuo Zhibua had been overly cautious, just in case. What affected him the most was still the kid's attitude. He was just too arrogant, which made him feel like he had a powerful background. When the cruel truth was revealed, all Zhuo Zhibua felt was that he had been viciously toyed with. His face reddened at first before darkening. His fury towards Li Qingshan erupted all at once. "Please calm down, Commander Zhuo." Gu Jian persuaded him tactfully. Zhuo Zhibua said frigidly, "As a Black Hawk commander, I stand above 1,000,000 people. Who knows how many lives I've taken? Who knows how many years it's been since someone has been bold enough to toy with me like this? Li Qingshan, oh Li Qingshan, you're impressive." Gu Jian said, "Though, the kid is in ancient Wind City. He probably won't be able to return. Why must you be angry at a dead person, Commander?" Zhuo Zhibua said, "I just hate that I can't kill him myself. And that Zhou Wenbin. He's not a good person either." Gu Jian said, "He's all alone as the district magistrate. He doesn't even have a single Qi practitioner under his command, so why must you put up with him, Commander? Our Hawkwolf Guard is responsible for supervision. Why don't we find some evidence of his crimes and report him as well?" Zhuo Zhibua said, "Shut up. What evidence does he have that you can search for? He comes from the 100 schools of thought, and he has countless classmates. Even the prefect admires him very much. If I fall out with him, I'll only disappoint Commander Wang." Gu Jian said, "Yes, sir. I've misspoken." Zhuo Zhibua said, "Let's just wait for the news of the kid dying in the line of duty now. Afterwards, he would immediately set off for ancient Wind City and destroy the Qian family, avenging Li Qingshan and demonstrating the might of the Hawkwolf Guard. That old man Qian should have saved up quite a lot over all these years. It was about time for him to use his blade." Takitra, this was Qian Rongji's original evil plan, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. She could eliminate the Qian family and Li Qingshan, and she could also get a generous share of the spoils from Zhuo Zhibua. In the evening, Li Qingshan arrived in front of the sinkhole at the foot of the west mountain that the magistrate had mentioned. That sinkhole wasn't especially big, but it was more than enough to hold 1,000 corpses. A strong putrid smell came from the sinkhole. Li Qingshan subconsciously held his breath. It had only been a day, but the corpse had already rotted. It was even more unbearable than the thick smell of blood from last night. The gathered workers were moving the corpses over, taking off their clothes and throwing them into the fire. Then, they threw the white corpses into the pit. Everyone frowned and used a wet cloth to wipe their mouths and noses. If the district magistrate had not spent a lot of money and threatened them with a plague, no one would have been willing to come. Not only was the stench unbearable, but it was also very inauspicious. A wisp of black smoke rose from the fire and went straight into the sky. There was not even a trace of wind in the surroundings. The dusky yellow sun that was about to set was still emitting a scorching heat, causing the dirty air to distort slightly. Hundreds of crows cawed and circled in the sky. From time to time, they would fly down and peck the eyeballs of the corpses. All of this was even more inauspicious than last night. And in the world, there was probably nothing more filthy than this. The district magistrate had been hiding far away. When he heard that Li Qingshan had also come, he hurriedly came over and said, "My lord, do you think I've done a good job?" Li Qingshan nodded. Before he could reply, the district magistrate looked at the sinkhole, covered his mouth and vomited. Finally, he left in a sorry state. When all the corpses were thrown into the sinkhole, the workers dug up the soil and filled the pit. This work was almost completed when the sun set and night fell. Li Qingshan hesitated for a moment and threw the porcelain jar in his hand into the center of the sinkhole. He let the commoners bury him together with the corpses. Li Qingshan stood at the edge of the sinkhole for a long time. The stench did not dissipate even after a long time. Do you know? Where there are corpses buried, flowers and trees will grow especially well. When I was a child, I poisoned a dog and buried it in the greenhouse. Since then, every year, the flowers will bloom especially brightly. Li Qingshan turned around and saw Diao Fei and Qian Rongji standing not far away. Qian Rongji walked forward and looked at the sinkhole. In less than a year, this place will be the most luxuriant. Li Qingshan was not in the mood to reply to her ravings. Diao Fei said, "The task is completed. Is it time for us to go back?" Li Qingshan said, "I still need to stay for a while to deal with the property and the fields. You can go back first." Qian Rongji sneered. "Don't tell me you're trying to run away? You don't know Gu Yenying at all, do you? How could a country bumpkin like you know a woman like that? Zhuozhibwa has probably already investigated everything now. You'll die the moment you return. But how are you supposed to run away? Just the crime of betraying the Hawkwolf Guard is enough for you to find nowhere to hide in the world." Li Qingshan grabbed Qian Rongji by the neck and said calmly, "Do you believe that I'll kill you right now? I'll bury you with these people." "Stop, Qingshan." Diao Fei wanted to go up and stop him, but Li Qingshan raised his left hand towards him, and he stopped. Qian Rongji said with difficulty, "If you want to kill me, you'll have to silence Diao Fei. Will you do that?" Diao Fei's expression changed drastically. He could not help but take a few steps back and raise his guard. After last night, he no longer believed that he was Li Qingshan's opponent anymore. Li Qingshan was expressionless as his hand gradually tightened. Qian Rongji's face was bright red, and fear filled her eyes. Just when she felt like her neck was about to snap, it suddenly loosened. She dropped to her knees and gasped for air. Li Qingshan said, "Don't provoke me." He met Qian Rongji's resentful gaze. "Go back and tell Zhuozhibwa that I'll be returning to Jiaping very soon. If he can't wait, he can come find me in ancient Wind City. I'll be waiting for him at any time." Afterwards, he crouched down and said to Qian Rongji, "If you want to harm me, then you better be fully prepared. You only have one chance. If you fail, I'll stop at nothing to kill you. Of course, you better give up. Otherwise, if I'm in a bad mood one day, I might just kill you to make myself happy." The resentment was gradually replaced by fear. Under those calm words, Qian Rongji felt an indescribable pressure. That feeling of suffocation was even deeper than the feeling of her neck being strangled just now. "What good will it do for me to harm you?" Qian Rongji avoided Li Qingshan's gaze and said with a stiff expression, "As the saying goes, evil people will be tortured by evil people." When her insidious evil met Li Qingshan's strong and cruel evil, she naturally retreated. Li Qingshan stood up and left the sinkhole, heading for ancient Wind City. Qian Rongji stood up and dusted off the dirt on her body. She straightened her clothes, and a smile returned to her face. She looked at Li Qingshan's back and said to herself, "One chance." Diao Fei felt a chill in his heart and asked, "Are you going back?" Qian Rongji smiled and said, "It wasn't easy for me to return to my hometown. How can I leave so soon?" Hearing her answer, Diao Fei actually let out a sigh of relief in his heart. Among the three of them, he was in the third layer of the Qi refinement realm. He was also the oldest and had the most experience in the Jianghu. Even his reputation was much greater. His name, Diao Fei, Master Diao, was also very famous in the Jianghu. It was not something the likes of Black Tiger could compare to. He was famous for being crafty, sinister, and difficult to deal with. However, being between the two of them, he felt like he was between a poisonous snake and a ferocious tiger. At every moment, he felt like he could die a violent death. This was not an illusion. Whether it was Qian Rongji's evil plan or Li Qingshan's unyielding methods, Diao Fei's personal safety was not guaranteed at all. The risk was extremely high. If Qian Rongji asked Qian Yannian to harm Li Qingshan, Diao Fei would be killed as well. When Li Qingshan faced Qian Yannian, if Qian Yannian directly used his killing move and summoned the gung metal sword qi or even the lightning summoning talisman, it was also very likely that he would be killed. Although Li Qingshan would not sit idly by, he would definitely not expose his identity as a demon for him. It had to be said that Diao Fei's experience in the Jianghu had not been in vain. His senses were very sharp. And just now, when that ferocious black tiger pressed down the colorful poisonous snake and let out a threatening growl, the innocent Diao Fei naturally became the poisonous snake's bargaining chip. Then, it made the ferocious tiger ponder whether it should be ruthless for once. Diao Fei left in a hurry. In the end, he glanced back at Qian Rongji from afar before completely vanishing into the darkness. He had decided that he would never carry out missions with the two of them again. No, he would maintain his distance from them. The colorful, poisonous snake stood before the pit of 1,000 corpses she had personally created, silently brewing new venom. She even felt rather grateful for the black tiger's threat just now. The moment she revealed her venomous fangs would be her death. Even if she succeeded, she would be torn to pieces by the furious tiger. However, she was not overly worried. Patience had always been the best quality of a poisonous snake. She had been able to put up with the Qian family for over a decade, to the point where everyone believed she had already been completely tamed. She did not resent the Qian family at all. She even made Qian Yannian allow her to join the Hawkwolf Guard in Jiaping City. That was because she had reached the second layer 3 years ago, which gave her the ability to leave the Qian family. Back then, Qian Yannian had basically already trusted her. He did not restrict her freedom at all. If she wanted to, she could just flee and leave the Qian family's sphere of influence. Qian Yannian would not be able to find her. If she were a regular person, they would not have been able to put up with it a long time ago. They would have used this opportunity to flee far away. However, she did not. She was willing to endure 3 more years of humiliation, appearing even more submissive than before. Only then did she earn even more trust. All for this opportunity, to stab the venom into the enemy's throat. She would continue to wait silently, waiting for an opportunity that might never appear. However, she felt like there was probably no need for her to do anything. The shadow of a vulture in the sky had already engulfed the tiger. The tiger was startlingly vicious, but it was still too young after all. Chapter 145. However, Qian Yannian felt that there were many strange things about this whole thing. Holy Church, she had already figured out what kind of person Li Qingshan was. He might be brave and unyielding, but he definitely wasn't lacking in brains. Everyone knew that fighting against a 6th layer Qi practitioner with a 2nd layer was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, but he was fearless. Her purposeful probing just now proved once again that he indeed didn't have a background to rely on. Then what did he rely on? That night on the boat, Qian Rongming went to cause trouble for Li Qingshan. He didn't die at Diao Fei's hands, but died at Li Qingshan's hands because he used a special method to hide his true strength. Could it be that his true strength wasn't just at the 2nd layer? Qian Rongji's heart skipped a beat. Zhao Liangqing and Furong's inexplicable disappearance might have been a coincidence. However, she knew Qian Yannian's strength very well. Even if he dodged those 2 gung metal qi swords, he had many powerful talismans in his 100 treasures pouch. How could they be useless? She closed her eyes and began to recall. After washing away the blood and madness, the scene of that night reappeared in front of her eyes. Qian Yannian glared at her, but he didn't say a word. His jaw was broken. There were many wounds on his body, but the fatal one was on his chest. That was why her water-splitting thorn could easily pierce through it. When Qian Yannian came out, he was on the verge of death. Li Qingshan seemed to be in a sorry state after being sent flying, but he didn't have any decent injuries at all. He defeated Xianxia head-on. Li Qingshan must have a very powerful trump card to be so arrogant. Considering the wounds on Xianxia's body, Li Qingshan's body-tempering technique was very likely much stronger than what he showed. So strong that he could instantly take away Xianxia's 100 treasures pouch, break his jaw, pierce through his chest, and then pretend to be sent flying. If that was the case, everything made sense. All of Li Qingshan's words and actions became reasonable. As the saying goes, a thief is a villain, but he is wiser than a gentleman. Li Qingshan didn't expect that his actions would be described in such detail. Qian Rongji saw another scene. A fierce tiger crouched in the dense forest, waiting for a vulture to descend from the sky. 7. Who is the hunter and who is the prey? It's still unknown. Zhuozhibua, that idiot, claimed the word wisdom in vain. He actually couldn't see the danger hidden within. As expected, he was the same as Qianxia. He looked smart and experienced, but in reality he was rotten and stupid. However, they couldn't be blamed. They had been suppressing everyone with their strength for too long. Naturally, they couldn't be bothered to use their brains. Of course, she wouldn't kindly remind Zhuozhibua. She would be happy no matter who died. It would be best if they perished together. For the first time, she felt that Li Qingshan had a higher chance of winning. He was in the dark, and the people in the dark were terrifying. She had experienced this firsthand. If she used this matter to threaten Li Qingshan now, she would definitely die. If she went back and reported this to Zhuozhibua, there wouldn't be any benefits. Moreover, if she lost the bet, she would have to be buried with Zhuozhibua. Li Qingshan's warning was not a joke. Then, if she bet on Li Qingshan, would she be able to get a share of Zhuozhibua's corpse? She seriously considered the various possibilities. Being a cunning villain was indeed much more difficult than being a pedantic gentleman. At this moment, she was absolutely calm and rational. She was even more broad-minded than a gentleman. She completely cast aside her personal honor and disgrace. Everything was for the sake of profit. In the sinkhole, a chilly wind suddenly blew towards Qian Rongji, causing her back to feel cold. Unknowingly, it was already very late at night. She turned her head and saw a ball of dark green will-the-wisp floating above the sinkhole. Even regular people would be alarmed, let alone the culprit behind all of this. However, she only scolded with a smile, "Damned ghost." Afterwards, she temporarily set aside the matter regarding Li Qingshan. There were even more important matters waiting for her. Now, it was time for her to really make a trip home. She raised her head and smiled at the starry sky. Father, mother, brother and sister, you must be anxious from waiting. After Qian Rongji left, an astonishing change was taking place under the thick soil in the sinkhole. The porcelain jar cracked like a spider web and shattered with a loud bang. The blood flame of corpse incineration surged like a tide and burned in all directions, devouring all the corpses and filthy flesh and blood, turning them into a part of the blood flame and burning even more fiercely. The dark bottom of the sinkhole turned into a bright sea of fire. The rotten and filthy corpses turned into clear and rising flames. The will-the-wisp on the top of the sinkhole disappeared. Crash, thousands of white bones fell to the bottom of the sinkhole. Little and sat cross-legged in the center of the raging blood flame, manipulating it while absorbing its energy. The skulls at the bottom of the sinkhole opened their dark eye sockets and looked at him silently. Little and pointed his finger downwards and the blood flame split into thousands of flaming snakes and pierced into the skulls. The pitch-black eye sockets also lit up with the same blood flame as his. All of the skeletons were shaking violently and colliding with each other, producing rapid banging sounds. Then, they flew up and pieced their bones back together. Thousands of large and small skeletons jumped at the bottom of the sinkhole and danced wildly in the flames. The sound of bones colliding with each other was like music, and the sound of teeth chattering was like a song of joy. They surrounded Little and in the center, as if they were carrying out a grand memorial service. The blood flame of corpse incineration could split off and reside in other skeletons, resonating with Little and being controlled by his will. He knew this a long time ago. However, this was meaningless. These frail skeletons would probably not even be able to defeat low-level cultivators. A skull flew up and landed in Little Anne's hand. Their eye sockets met, and the blood flame burned together. A hint of paleness gradually appeared within the bright red color of the blood flame of corpse incineration. The light of joy appeared in Little Anne's eye sockets. This was a flame that had advanced to the next level of the path of white bone and great beauty, the pale flames of bone incineration. As its name implied, the flame could melt white bones. If it were a regular flame, it would only be able to char white bones no matter how hot it was. However, under the licking of the pale flames of bone incineration, the skull melted like candy. This process was extremely slow and unbelievably slow. After a long while, the skull just now completely melted, turning into a drop of pale white liquid that dripped into his forehead. Then he raised his hand. A bone arm landed in his hand, and he continued to melt it down. As he refined the white bones, the pale flames of bone incineration grew stronger and stronger. At the same time, it melted Little Anne's body of white bones. This process was 100 times more painful than when he used his blood to cultivate. It was like countless steel needles, saws, and grinds his body. Regular people would go mad from the pain in an instant, or even die from it. It would be impossible for them to persevere, but the flames in his eyes burned brightly. There was no fear at all. Every time he felt like he could no longer endure it, a snowstorm would appear before his eyes, and he would return to that windy and snowy night below the ice-sword cliff. Li Qingshan swatted him to the side with a wave of his hand, telling him to leave. Then he disappeared into the snowstorm, climbing the ice cliff alone and walking the path of death. He stood alone in the snowstorm for a very long time. He did not hide as he had been told. Instead, his entire body was stiff and bone-chilling. He thought anxiously, "Am I going to die?" Then he knelt on the ground, his entire body in pain. In the end, he caught up. At the crucial moment, he helped Li Qingshan, because he did not know where else he could go. When everything was over, he looked at Li Qingshan and roared at the sky. He could not speak, but he gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. The impact that night had on his soul was no less than Li Qingshan's. Compared to the pain at that time, what was this moment compared to the pain at that time? The raging pale flames of bone incineration enveloped his entire body, melting away the traces of impurities. At the same time, it merged with even more bone fluid, and the cycle continued. Before he could reconstruct his physical body, he wanted to reconstruct his bone body, become stronger, and keep up with his footsteps. Li Qingshan came to the county office and handed a pile of land deeds to the county magistrate for him to auction. The county magistrate was overwhelmed by the favor. "Milord, I'm afraid this cannot be sold in a short period of time." Li Qingshan said, "I know that time is of the essence. Even if the price is discounted, it does not matter. Consider it a benefit for the citizens of ancient Wind City." With a few hundred qi gathering pills in hand, he did not care too much about the silver. He had thought of burning it all, but that would definitely cause a huge commotion in ancient Wind City. That was why he had resorted to this method. The county magistrate said, "Milord, your merit is boundless. On behalf of the citizens of ancient Wind City, I thank you for your kindness." Merit? Li Qingshan smiled. He did not believe in this. Settle this within a month. Even without a warning, he did not believe that the county magistrate would dare to cheat him. At most, it would be a small profit, and that was natural. The county magistrate said, "Milord, is there anything else?" Li Qingshan turned and walked out the door. "I will stay in the city for a while. Just don't bother me." As the largest landlord in the city, Li Qingshan obviously would not stay in an inn. He chose a small manor halfway up the mountain. It was not far from the Qian Manor, and the surroundings were very quiet. Most importantly, he could see the pit from here. He stood in the courtyard. There were grape trellises in the courtyard, and there was a rocking chair under the grape trellises. There was also a large fire tank to the side. There were a few carps in the tank, swimming freely. A crescent moon rippled on the dark water surface. Although Little and did not say it, he could vaguely sense that the path of white bone and great beauty was an extremely impressive ability. It did not require spiritual pills or spiritual herbs, and the cultivation speed was extremely fast. Its power was astonishing as well. However, everything was equal. One needed to possess talent beyond the reach of normal people, and one needed to endure pain that normal people could not. Although little and was only a child, he was a very smart and strong child. There was no need for him to worry too much. The only thing he was worried about was the future, their future. After so many years, little N's family was probably long gone. Perhaps they'll just go back to reminisce about a few graves, and then I'll adopt him. Li Qingshan scratched his head. It really is a demonic thought, a demonic thought. In the end, he decided not to think too much about it. He just sat on the ground and tossed a chi-gathering pill into his mouth, crushing it. A heavy bitterness spread, but his mind was clear. He then began to cultivate. A ray of sunlight fell on his eyelids. His eyelashes fluttered a few times, and he opened his eyes. Chapter 146. Looking down from here, ancient Wind Mountain City was like a flight of stairs. Rows upon rows of buildings were built on these stairs, and they were all coated with a layer of red light. Holy churchmany people surged out from the intersecting alleys and streets. There were peddlers, people selling breakfast, people buying groceries, and there were also early morning merchants. It was a bustling scene. Looking down from here, the view was extremely wide, and the mind was broadened. So the scenery here is this good? Li Qingshan was slightly surprised. He took a deep breath and practiced a set of fist techniques, stretching his limbs. He could feel the flow of true qi in his body. After eating the 9 qi-gathering pills last night, he had grown a little stronger. His cultivation of qi practitioner level 2 was gradually stabilizing. He was not in a hurry to cultivate his demon core and demon body. Instead, he swallowed a large number of qi-gathering pills. He had a feeling that he would be staying here for a while, and the next batch of qi-gathering pills would have to be obtained in Jiaping City. If he took a large number of pills, it would lead to a shortage of energy. It would be better to take it slow like this. The demon core and demon body would naturally absorb a portion of the medicinal effects. He found an old set of clothes that belonged to the original owner of the room and changed out of the Black Wolf uniform. Then he opened the door and walked down the stairs. He ate a special snack at a shop with the word tea hanging on it. He felt like his great dream of eating all the delicacies in the world had been realized just a little bit more. Then he continued walking contentedly. He purposely walked very slowly, admiring the scenery along the street. He did not know how long it had been since he had calmed down like this to do something like this. Ever since he began cultivating, his days had been tense and urgent. Even after returning to the human world and returning to the ancient city of Jiaping, he still had to deal with the endless changes. He had to punish evil, assassinate powerful enemies, and defend against enemies. Even if he had some free time, he had to make good use of it to cultivate, not daring to relax at all. He had almost forgotten the taste of leisure. He thought back to the days when he was herding cows on Crouching Ox Hill. He would look at the mountains, play a flute, and avoid the oppression of his brother and sister-in-law. Before he knew it, an afternoon had passed. Holy Church, it was as if they were two completely opposite lives, but each had their own interesting parts. But he still preferred his current life. He would not reminisce about the past. Now, looking at the noisy crowd on the street, unknowingly, there was already a sense of estrangement. Although they were still cultivators of the lowest and weakest level, qi condensation, they had already formed an irreversible divergence from mortals. Mortals were like walking on flat ground, getting married and having children, from birth to death. Cultivators, on the other hand, were climbing a peak that they could never reach. Every time he advanced, he would be able to see new sceneries, extend his lifespan, and not be trapped by life and death. In front of the county government, a notice had been pasted, and a literate low-ranking official was specially assigned to read it aloud, announcing that all the fields and properties of the Qian family would be auctioned in 7 days. Hundreds of people surrounded the front of the county government office, pointing fingers and discussing animatedly. Li Qingshan stood in the crowd and looked up for a while. This county magistrate's reaction was quite fast. Then he made his way through the crowd and entered a small bookstore. He spent 2 taels of silver to buy a dozen or so books, including poetry, history, and miscellaneous topics. Afterwards, he found a music store and spent 35 taels of silver to buy 2 music scores and a jade flute. When he returned home, he laid down on the rattan chair under the grape trellis and casually flipped open a book, reading it carefully. The sun had already risen high into the sky, turning from red to white. Through the dense grape leaves, the scattered sunlight landed on the yellowed pages of the book, as well as his face. Only now did he seem like a teenager, rather than a fearless cultivator or a decisive black wolf guard. The edges on his face that seemed to be carved from stone seemed to have dulled slightly, while his gaze that had always been as sharp as a sword had returned to its sheath, becoming deep and clear. The spirit turtle's demon core revolved slowly in his body with unprecedented clarity and agility. Water vapor surged over naturally, soaking his clothes. His mind was submerged in a great battle in the history books, so he failed to notice it. The sacred church, it was a state of mind, a form of cultivation. He had to unstring the bow when it was not in use. He relaxed himself from his tense state and nurtured his body and mind, all for the sake of shooting an even more powerful arrow in the future, or perhaps very soon. Not everyone had such leisure. There was a small town several dozen kilometers away from ancient wine city called Shangguan Town, as most of the people there bore the surname of Shangguan. Although there were a few surnames, it was not some clan of martial arts. The people there were only the most ordinary of people. There was a clan in the town that went from an ordinary clan to one of the greatest clans in Shangguan Town in a single leap because they had a daughter with the surname Qian. Their walls were painted white and their servants were plentiful. They sang happily every day, becoming the envy of the entire town. On the official road from ancient Wind City to Shangguan Town, a black-clothed knight was riding a white horse as he slowly moved forward. Qian Rongji gazed at Shangguan Town on the horizon from afar. Her heart that had been as still as water suddenly became a mess. She could not help but tighten her grip on the water-splitting barb on her waist. The icy weapon brought her a sliver of warmth. The sun shone brightly, but her eyes carried a sliver of gloom that she could not shake off. She said in a self-deprecating manner, "Qian Rongji, oh Qian Rongji. You've really overestimated yourself." She had been taken away from that clan. After she achieved some accomplishments in cultivation, Qian Yannian allowed her to return to visit her family. Afterwards, she would return frequently and treat everyone in the clan extremely gently. She wanted Qian Yannian to believe that she was nostalgic and valued relationships. She wanted the Qian family to believe that these people were enough to control her. But now, she had broken free from her restraints, so there was no longer any reason for these illusions to exist. Her heart gradually grew cold. It was time for her to end things. No one deserved happiness from her misfortune. No one. Shangguan Manor. The vermilion door was wide open. Blood flowed out from behind the screen wall. Behind the screen wall, Qian Rongji held the water-splitting barb in her hand. She frowned and pondered. Around her lay a dozen or so corpses. There were guards, servants, maids, and old maidservants. She could call out each and every one of their names. But now they were all dead. She continued to walk into the manor. She saw more and more corpses. When she arrived at the inner courtyard, she saw the corpse of a noblewoman lying dead on the ground. She used to be a village woman. Now, she wore expensive beads on her head. She wore the precious silk that she had brought from the south. However, it was already badly mutilated by the blood. She could barely remember this noblewoman's name. She had called her mother for too long. Yet, she felt an indescribable sense of loss in her heart. She took a deep look at the corpse and stepped over it. Then she saw more familiar people, including her brothers and sisters. Even though it was noon, the ancestral hall was still very dark. In the heavy darkness, there were many memorial tablets, enshrining the ancestors of the Shangguan family. A gray-haired, green-faced old man held a plump, middle-aged man hostage. He stared at Qian Rongji coldly and hatefully as she walked in. He called out, "Shangguan Rongji, I knew you'd return." Qian Rongji said with mixed emotions, "Third uncle." The old man was Qian Yanyan's nephew. He had practiced martial arts for many years, finally breaking through to the innate realm and reaching the second layer of Qi practitioner. He became one of the masters of the Qian family. That night, he had fled from the main hall of the Qian family. Diao Fei did not choose to chase after him, which was why he managed to escape with his life. Qian Rongji said, "Did you do all of this?" Her third uncle said, "That's right. Shengguan Rongji, you traitor. How dare you mention the word money? You've caused the deaths of everyone in the Qian family. You've destroyed the Qian family. You've destroyed everything I had. I will slaughter your entire family. Rongji, save me." The plump, middle-aged man shuddered. Tears and snot flowed from his nose. Who knew whether he was afraid or sad? It was the person she called father. Qian Rongji said furiously and frantically, "Father, I will definitely save you. Qian Haoda, release my father." Qian Haoda said, "Do you know fear now? You bitch. Throw down your weapons and kneel." As soon as Qian Rongji hesitated, he crushed the man's shoulder. The man shrieked out and ordered, "Why don't you kneel?" With a clang, Qian Rongji tossed down the water-splitting barb and knelt down. She made her way forward as she knelt. She said sorrowfully, "Please release my father." Qian Haoda smiled madly and complacently. He was reluctant to kill her in a single stroke. Not only did he want to destroy her entire family, but he even wanted to torture the person closest to him before her. Qian Rongji took another step forward and reached backwards with her right hand. True Qi swept up the water-splitting barb and returned it to her hand. She leapt up and stabbed at Qian Haoda as hard as she could. Qian Haoda pulled the plump man in front of him and used him as a meat shield, blocking him firmly. Then he grabbed the man's other shoulder. Once he forced back Qian Rongji, he would torture him viciously. He would definitely make this bitch regret everything she had done. However, he suddenly felt a chill in his chest. Qian Rongji had no intentions of stopping. The water-splitting barb stabbed deeply into the meat shield, and the tip entered Qian Haoda's chest. True Qi turned into blue light and passed through his body. "You dash?" Qian Haoda and the plump man both stared at Qian Rongji in disbelief. All they saw was that the sorrow on her face had already vanished completely. She had become cold and complacent. Qian Rongji smiled. "Originally, it would have been rather difficult to kill you." Qian Haoda said, "Shengguan Rongji, you vicious woman. You won't even spare your own family." Qian Rongji corrected herself. "I'm not Shengguan Rongji. I'm Qian Rongji. Basically all my family is dead. You're the only one left. From today onwards, I have no family at all." Suddenly, she drew the water-splitting barb. Qian Haoda and the plump man collapsed on the ground at the same time. Qian Rongji did not even glance at the plump man. She removed 100 treasures pouch from Qian Haoda and said sweetly, "Thank you, third uncle." She was just like the obedient girl from before. Qian Haoda raised his hand with difficulty and gathered true qi. The water-splitting barb pierced through the man's head without any hesitation. "There's no need to be so polite with it. Rongji, save me." The plump man extended his hand with difficulty and grabbed the hem of Qian Rongji's clothes. Chapter 147. "I'm your father." The plump man spat out blood as he called out, "Do you have a daughter?" Qian Rongji was surprised. She thought about it seriously. "Oh, I did, but didn't I sell it already? Afterwards, I used the money to get a few concubines." The plump man said with difficulty, "I did all of that for you. I gave you a good future. You should thank me. Everything I have right now was obtained through my hard work. Stop taking credit for me." Qian Rongji suddenly flew into a rage and kicked his hand away. The plump man opened his mouth, unable to say anything. Resentment and despair filled his face before he finally breathed his last. "You were fortunate because of my misfortune, and now you're unfortunate because of my fortune. It's very fair, isn't it?" Qian Rongji said to herself. She walked out of the estate and cast everything behind her. All of her memories had been erased. Qian Rongji held a grand funeral in Shangguan town. She followed the most expensive and complicated ceremony, scattering paper money into the air. She knelt before the memorial tablets, leaning against the coffin as she cried until she almost fainted. However, she forced herself up and thanked every single person who had come to mourn her sorrowfully. Rongji was just carrying out an errand for the empire. I never thought she'd actually cause such a great disaster. Sigh, such a good daughter like Rongji has actually encountered something like this. The people of the Qian family are truly heartless. Deep into the night, everyone dispersed. The main door was firmly shut, and a pair of white lanterns swayed in the wind at the entrance. After turning down the neighbors who wanted to keep watch for her, Qian Rongji leaned against the coffin of her entire family in white mourning clothes. She took out a jar of alcohol from her third uncle Qian Haoda's 100 treasures pouch and a cup from the offering table. She poured away the alcohol that had been offered to the deceased and filled it up again. She raised the cup towards the memorial tablets before drinking it all. The next day, the coffin was buried. She was already a great filial daughter who was grief-stricken. She stayed by the coffin for 7 days. On the night of the first 7 days, a dozen or so wine jars were strewn all over the place. Suddenly, she felt a chill run down her spine. She opened her eyes in a daze. A dozen or so shadows were standing in front of her. They were all extremely familiar faces, and they were staring at her coldly. She laughed drunkenly and pulled out the water-splitting dagger. With a sweep of the dagger, the chilly wind dispersed and the shadow shrieked. As soon as he regained his senses, he took a look at his surroundings. There was no shadow in sight, and he was unable to differentiate between reality and illusion. Bang! The wine jars smashed onto the memorial tablets. The memorial tablets fell to the ground, and the wine spilled all over the floor. She held onto the candle flame and gently let go. The flame quickly spread, engulfing the names on the memorial tablets and spreading to the entire ancestral hall. She walked out of the fiery ancestral hall and disappeared into the darkness without looking back. Behind her, the fire spread to the entire mansion. Who was it that made the vow to never return to their hometown? The sound of the flute echoed in the dusk, and it did not stop for a long time. Li Qingshan put down the jade flute. He felt that the quality and intonation of the flute was much better than the bamboo flute he made years ago. He lived a quiet life. Every day, he would read books and play the flute. When he was free, he would wander around the city for a while and eat some fresh food. His life was very peaceful. Splash! The water in the water jar splashed, and the carp swung its huge tail. "Don't be noisy," Li Qingshan said. "I'll give you a bigger pool in a few days." The water jar immediately became quiet. A few days ago, he had crushed a qi concentration pill of poor quality and sprinkled it into the tank. The next day, the carp had grown a full circle, and on the third day, it had grown another full circle. Today, the water tank was so narrow that it could not accommodate the carps swimming around. Li Qingshan stood on top of the water jar and looked at the huge red carp. "Why don't I just stew you?" The carp sank to the bottom of the jar. "It's a pity that my culinary skills are average." Li Qingshan smiled and grabbed at the water jar. The demon core rotated, and the water in the jar surged out. It kept changing shape in the air, and the carp swam in the middle. Li Qingshan brought the carp and walked towards the Qian house. There was a big pool in the Qian house that could accommodate the carp. Climbing over the walls and doors, the huge Qian house was empty. It had turned from bustling to desolate, and there was always something strange about it. It had only been 10 days since anyone had taken care of it. Weeds had grown on the small paths, and daughter had climbed up the pillars. There was a sense of decadence amidst the vitality. On the stone steps, the dried bloodstains that could not be wiped clean exuded an ominous feeling. After so many days, no one in the entire ancient Wind City dared to go near this place. They only dared to look at it from afar and sigh. Although this house was auctioned by the district magistrate, Li Qingshan knew that no one would buy it. It would not be long before it was completely abandoned and become a haunted house. In the lotus pond, the lotus flowers had long withered, but the leaves were still dense. "No one will come here to eat you." Splash! Li Qingshan threw the carp into the lotus pond. The carp raised its head and bobbed up and down, as if it was thanking him. Then it opened its mouth. Consider it your good fortune. Li Qingshan smiled and placed a qi-gathering pill in its mouth. Only then did it turn around and swim into the depths of the lotus pond. Li Qingshan was about to turn around and go back when he suddenly saw a flame in the distance. It shone through the shadows of the trees. He walked through the forest and walked towards the flame. From afar, he could smell a thick medicinal fragrance. He pushed the door open and saw a three-legged cauldron in the room. It was spitting out white steam, and there was a thick medicinal fragrance in the steam. A slim figure sat on a praying mat in front of the cauldron. She stretched out her hands and sent waves of true qi into the cauldron. The steam was sometimes more and sometimes less, controlled by the true qi. Li Qingshan recognized her at first glance. "Qian Rongji, what are you doing here?" Qian Rongji didn't answer. After a while, she retracted her hands just now and slowly played with the true qi. The lid of the cauldron opened with a bang, and steam filled the room. Li Qingshan was extremely familiar with this smell. "You're refining pills." He looked around and realized that this should be the Qian family's alchemy room. It was also the source of the 400 qi-gathering pills in his 100 treasures pouch. He had eaten many qi-gathering pills, but this was the first time he saw someone refine pills. He looked at the cauldron again. Although it was covered in green copper rust, it still shone with spiritual light. It was actually a low-grade spirit artifact. Li Qingshan originally thought that all the decent items of the Qian family would be put into the 100 treasures pouch. He didn't expect that there was another world here. This cauldron was so big that Xianxia would have to empty his 100 treasures pouch to barely fit it. The runes and spells attached to low-grade spirit artifacts were limited. This cauldron could spit out water, so of course it couldn't be big or small. Qian Rongji said with a smile, "This is my home." Li Qingshan said, "It's mine now. I've already bought it. According to the agreement, everything in the Qian family is mine, including this cauldron. I've really profited this time." Qian Rongji smiled as she took out the deed to the house and the land. "Count yourself lucky." Li Qingshan turned around and left. He didn't feel that it was a pity. If it wasn't for Qian Rongji, he wouldn't have bothered to search this Qian family mansion. Qian Rongji said, "Do you want to learn alchemy?" Li Qingshan stood still and turned around, saying, "What do you want?" Li Qingshan already understood that on the path of cultivation, other than the most basic qi refinement cultivation, there were also a few side occupations, such as talisman crafting, alchemy, artifact crafting, formations, and so on. Cultivators would usually master one or two of them, which was greatly beneficial to the path of cultivation. From the things in Qianyanyan's 100 treasures pouch, Qianyanyan didn't have much knowledge in artifact crafting and formations. However, he had some knowledge in talisman crafting and alchemy. This was also what he was interested in. "I want you." Qian Rongji hesitated for a moment. Biting her lips, she looked at Li Qingshan with extreme seriousness and shyness, saying, "You must think that I'm a lewd woman, but I've never done anything to a man." She felt that she had more or less figured out Li Qingshan's personality, so she secretly came up with a plan. Although it was a bit unexpected to bump into him today, it was a good chance to try it out. Li Qingshan would most likely reject her. Then, she would make a sad expression and tell him about her tragic childhood. At the crucial moment, she would shed a few tears. She didn't believe that his heart wouldn't soften. They would become a naked couple and make a solemn vow of undying love. With his forthrightness and generosity, she would definitely be able to swindle something out of him. However, just as she was seriously setting up her plot and writing the script, Li Qingshan once again acted freely without holding back. He smiled and interrupted her, saying, "All right, teach me alchemy, and I'll reluctantly sell you out." Although he didn't care about such a person, there was no reason for him to refuse such a good thing. He was a man, so why would he be afraid of her taking advantage of him? Qian Rongji's expression stiffened. Although she had thought of many possibilities, she never thought that Li Qingshan would be so shameless. It was completely different from what she had imagined, so she couldn't continue with the act. She suddenly remembered that the first time she met him, he was drinking wine in a restaurant. It was a huge mistake. The vine wanted to wrap around the tree to absorb the tree's sap and obtain more sunlight. It would be best if it could also wrap around the tree to death, but who would have thought that it would wrap around a metal pillar? As a transmigrator, Li Qingshan's horizons were very broad. Things like what Qian Rongji did in his previous life were practically the norm in society. Entertainment news wouldn't even be bothered to report it. At most, they wouldn't be as ruthless and calculative as her. Qian Rongji laughed dryly, saying, "You really know how to joke." Li Qingshan said, "Since you're done joking, let's talk about serious matters. What do you want in order to be willing to teach me alchemy? By the way, I can personally give it to you for free. I promise I won't despise you at all." Qian Rongji understood that seduction was useless against Li Qingshan. Even if she succeeded, it would be like throwing a meat bun at a dog. Not only would she not earn anything, but she would also have to pay something. Thus, she returned to her original self and went straight to the main topic. "I want the 7th Metal Fiendish Qi Manual." Li Qingshan said, "The one that Qian Yannian cultivates? I've looked through it. It's not there. Let's try something else." "That old bastard must have destroyed it," Qian Rongji cursed. Li Qingshan said, "The cultivation method is in the Hawkwolf Guard's library as well. You can read it once you get back." Qian Rongji said, "I've already looked through it. There's plenty of trash that can reach the 5th, 6th, or 7th layer. There's not a single one that can reach the 10th layer." Li Qingshan said, "Where did you get the merit from?" Qian Rongji only smiled. Li Qingshan said, "Forget about me asking. Where else can I find a Qi practitioner that can reach the 10th layer?" Qian Rongji said, "Don't you think that's very shameful? That's your freedom. What has it got to do with me?" Chapter 148. Qian Rongji found Li Qingshan to be far too strange. He did not seem like a young man at all. And, the more she understood him, the more she found his way of thinking to be different from ordinary people. After a moment of thought, she explained with a smile, "Speaking of methods of practicing Qi that can reach the 10th layer, there are 5 most famous ones." "Which 5? Li Qingshan gathered his attention when he heard something so important. Although Qian Rongji came from a small clan, according to the documents, she had once joined a large sect to cultivate, so she was knowledgeable. Qian Rongji said, "Do you know that every single person possesses the 5 elements? The 5 organs of the heart, liver, spleen, lung, and kidneys?" Qian Rongji said, "It's not as simple as the 5 organs. The study of the 5 elements is extremely profound. I can't explain it all in a moment, but every single person can choose one to practice. By focusing on one, their speed of practicing Qi will increase drastically. There are many cultivation methods for practicing true Qi of the 5 elements. The 5 most famous are the Gang metal method of sharpening Qi, the Yi wood method of living Qi, the Gui water method of condensing Qi, the Bing fire method of burning Qi, and the 5th earth method of unyielding Qi. Apart from a few special sects, such as the sect of clouds and rain, there were also the truly large sections. Many sects would allow their disciples to choose one of the 5 cultivation methods and practice them. Originally, Li Qingshan had been considering which cultivation method he would choose to practice after completing the innate method of practicing Qi, but now he had a vague idea of what to do. He did not believe in those secret methods. Although it was not absolute, he believed that survival of the fittest existed in this world. When a cultivation method became famous, it proved that it had been tested and tested by countless people. Who knew how many generations of people had modified it, making it universally applicable. And when he practiced it, he could use the experiences of many predecessors as reference. As the saying went, only when everyone was good would it truly be good. Li Qingshan asked, "Is it possible to cultivate any kind of Zhenqi?" Qian Rongji said, "Of course not. Everyone has a preference for different attributes. In the big sects, there are ways to test and choose the most suitable cultivation formula for oneself. However, I've heard that there are some talented geniuses who can cultivate 2 or even 3 types of true Qi at the same time. The amount of true qi they have is far greater than cultivators who only cultivate one type of true qi. Moreover, it is easier for them to break through realms. Why did you suddenly become so kind? Li Qingshan was surprised that Qian Rongji did not make any requests. I'm not a bad person to begin with. Qian Rongji smiled. Li Qingshan declined to comment. Qian Rongji said, if you don't believe me, I can teach you alchemy. Li Qingshan said, you don't want anything? Qian Rongji said, I don't want anything. Li Qingshan said, that's great. But his face did not show that he was particularly happy. Qian Rongji really began to teach him carefully. There are three most basic things in alchemy. The first is the materials, ranging from the most ordinary herbs to the most precious spiritual medicines. There are all sorts of strange and wondrous things, including everything. The second was the pill formula. Every pill had its own concoction method, and there were extremely precise requirements for the ingredients and the time needed to concoct it. The third is the furnace or the flame. According to the pill formula, refining the materials is the alchemy. Li Qingshan listened attentively. Unknowingly, 4 hours had passed. Only then did he have a basic understanding of alchemy. This Tao was indeed broad and profound. Even if one spent a lifetime of effort, he might not be able to reach the peak. He could only be considered to have a superficial understanding, not even a beginner. Qian Rongji said, regarding alchemy, this is about all I know. If you want to continue to study, you can only find another expert. Li Qingshan nodded slightly. Qian Rongji pointed to the furnace beside her. Do you want to try? There are still many herbs. Li Qingshan was slightly taken aback. He wondered whether she had gone insane or not. However, after hearing so much about alchemy, his hands just became itchy, so he sat down in front of the cauldron and personally controlled it, refining pills under Qian Rongji's guidance. However, because the fire was slightly too intense, he ruined a cauldron of qi-gathering pills. Qian Rongji did not show the slightest sign of pity or blame him. Instead, she encouraged him to continue trying. Li Qingshan did not say anything and continued to try. His qi was extremely pure. Using it was like using a finger. In the process of alchemy, he used it more exquisitely. After another 2 furnaces of pills were wasted, he finally succeeded. He retracted his hands, took a deep breath, and revealed a smile. Qian Rongji also praised him. Li Qingshan saw that the sky was beginning to brighten. Before he knew it, a night had passed. He stood up, took out a few bottles of qi-gathering pills and placed them on the ground, as compensation for the wasted pills and to pay the tuition fee. After watching Li Qingshan leave, Qian Rongji picked up the qi-gathering pills. Just now, Li Qingshan did not feel happy because of her generosity. Right now, Qian Rongji did not look happy either. Information regarding the qi methods of the 5 elements and basic alchemy were actually not exactly secrets, and the qi-gathering pills Li Qingshan had left behind were even more than the qi-gathering pills he had destroyed. And even if she was the one controlling the furnace, she could not say with certainty that she would succeed every time. So it could be said that she had earned quite a bit. If it was an ordinary person, they would probably feel happy, but she felt something cold from it. It was an extremely cold alienation, a lack of gratitude, and a lack of human feelings. At any time, if she dared to plot against him, he would not hesitate to put her on his kill list. He would not tolerate it. Another failed attempt. This was not a man who could be manipulated by favors. Could it be that he really had no weaknesses that could be exploited? Li Qingshan did not think too much about it. He was just happy that he had learned a new skill. The path of cultivation was vast and profound, and there were endless mysteries waiting for him to explore. Learning from others was not a bad thing. In the pit, the flames were still burning. The pale bone illuminating flame had already taken up a small portion of it. Little N's bones had become as smooth as jade. He was more powerful than ever before. And the white bones in the pit. The bones all over Yi Lian's body had come to an end, but there were still several hundred white bones in the pit. And Little N did not stop refining white bones. The blood flame of corpse incineration and the pale bone illuminating flame were both basic techniques of the path of white bone and great beauty. Their greatest use was not to kill or injure enemies, but for cultivation. The blood flame of corpse incineration was used to perfectly absorb the essence of flesh and blood without any wastage. The pale bone illuminating flame could refine bone fluid to strengthen the body. Aside from this, there was another use, and that was refining artifacts. Cultivators who cultivated the path of white bone and great beauty were different from other cultivators. The artifacts they used were also extremely unique. The path of white bone and great beauty had a section specifically for refining artifacts, which recorded dozens of unique artifacts. Blood sea banner, human skin robes, skull prayer beads. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.